Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the show. Hi. It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It's a podcast. It's about video games. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. I'll be hosting this week's edition of the show. And what a positive, amazing morning it's been for video games, huh? Anyway, hi. It's we'll get into the news, of course, later on. Man, it has been kind of a fucking wild week in video games. I just want to remind you here as we get going, you want to get an ad-free version of this program? You want an ad-free show? You want a bonus podcast every week? Head over to jeff.zone to check out the Patreon. Back the broadcast. Keep the nightmare train rolling through your neck of the woods by hitting up the Patreon. You get on the Discord, you get the bonus show, and more to come every week, baby. All right. Hi. So video games are still happening somehow in the man. It's I don't know. There's a bunch of layoffs this morning, and we'll get into it in the news, but it's one of those things that kind of like just happened, and it's like, oh geez, that's real bad. That's real bad. It was an interesting weekend for Marathon, which is Bungie's multiplayer shooter, which has been out for a couple of weeks now. This was the weekend where they debuted their new kind of I guess you could maybe call it an endgame kind of mode. It's kind of a big boss fight. They added a new level to the game that has a crazy, a much more difficult challenge for teams to encounter as they kind of make their way through it. It is, people were kind of comparing it before it was released to something sort of like a Destiny raid, which if you did not play Destiny, the raids in Destiny were like they took a first-person shooter and tried to insert like MMO-style raid mechanics into it. Now, if you've never played an MMO, I'm not going to go that far back. Look it up, man. But the Cryo archive, which was added to Marathon, which I'm still not high enough level to even attempt, but I ended up watching quite a bit of it. Quite a bit of it over the weekend, and seeing how it is structured. It's kind of like, it's an area of the game that is broken up into 7 different vaults, and each one of the vaults will have like a key code in it as you piece together this key that will let you into the final vault where you fight a boss fight against the Monitor, which, if you are familiar with Marathon lore from the 90s, because who isn't, right? That's I don't know. It's a very big deal. There's like a lot of cool, very big deal things throughout Marathon that are kind of, it's one of the things that I think helps set Marathon apart from other similar shooters, is that it has this kind of grounded lore, this grounded kind of world that has been around for decades, and that normally that'd be kind of a whatever sort of thing, but the way it's leveraged in a multiplayer game, as well as like how it is in a lot of ways true to the way that story was leveraged in the original Marathon games, meaning they were things you walked up to terminals and often read because it was the 90s. It's actually kind of fucking awesome to see that stuff pay off in a really weird way. It definitely gives the game an additional dimension. Anyway, they're doing something interesting with the Cryo archive. So people beat the boss. They found a cool gun. This stuff, right? Like it took, I think the team that beat it first, they ran it for like 12 hours or something, and to finally figure out what they needed to do to get through it. One of my favorite things to do. So, if you at the end of your time in a Marathon level, you need to get out. It is all about escape. and they have extraction zones that are around all of the maps, and normally it's a little tower you walk up to. It takes 50 seconds to charge up, and then you worry about getting out. In Cryo Archive, it's a button you push, and then like the point where you actually extract is somewhere else. And people didn't realize this. And so there's a bunch of videos of people hitting this button and then standing there at this terminal going like, all right, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. And then the time expires and they all die. Like, yeah. Eat shit, man. It's very good. But they're doing something interesting with this that I think, some people are not super thrilled about, but I think it makes sense in the context of the game. Is that it's Monday and now that level is not in the game anymore. It will open back up on the weekends. And that's something that they are like, with everything with this game, they're being very like, this is how we're doing it now. We are open to changing that, but that is something that that is how we're going to run that now. Cryo Archive will be open on most weekends. And I think, like, logically, it makes a lot of sense. So you think about it as, like, okay, you have your gear. You go out into all of the levels, and you go out there, and you gear up. You get good guns. You get good shields. You get whatever it is you need to get. You get credits to buy the shields you need, or you go steal them off the corpses of the people you've murdered, whatever. That takes time. Especially once you get to the Cryo Archive and start losing all of that loot by dying in that mission over and over again. So it's this kind of interesting cycle of spend the week getting the shit you'll need to go out on the weekend and be successful in the raid, in the archive. And I think that's a really neat idea, assuming your schedule works out, right? If you don't, if you're like, I can't play this game on the weekends, then that's a bummer, and so I think that's something they will eventually change, and that's something, they open and close ranked play on a similar kind of schedule and whatever else. So they've said basically like, okay, we'll start to play around with this schedule a little bit as time goes on, and so I assume that they will do exactly that. Ranked play is not something that I'm necessarily like super interested in myself, but like reading the way they're doing it, it's kind of weird because it feels like that they just built Supermarket Sweep into a shooter. Like you need to go in and basically get out of the level with as much loot as possible, and all of it is worth some amount of money. And so basically it's like the delta between the amount of money you bring in your loadout and the amount of money you extract with determines your score for that run, which I think is interesting. Like, but that's not necessarily something that I want to engage with myself. But I've still been playing quite a bit of that, and enjoying it a great deal. So I don't know. That's still it is such a fucking cool video game. And just I don't know, I love the way it looks and the way it feels and a lot of that other stuff. So yeah, that's still ongoing. I do want to get to a place where I can run the Cryo Archive and see all of that stuff, because watching it on a stream, I'm like, yeah, no, that seems like something I could do. Like, that seems tricky. Like watching there's definitely like a difference between players that are like playing a lot of this game and have become very well versed in things like how far you can fall and how much damage you will take when you fall, and how, like, I play this game very slowly, especially when I'm playing solo. Like, I play the game very slowly, and so it's very much like I'm crouch walking around these levels and trying not to make noise and doing all this stuff. And watching some of the players that were like trying to race through this raid, they're just like jumping off the side of stuff, and they're just like moving at full speed at all times. They're managing their stamina very well, their heat, to make sure that they can kind of keep moving. They're moving into these fights very quickly, and it's very interesting to see kind to see that style of play. And it's something that I think, like, because a maximum session is going to be like half an hour, like there's sort of an interesting balance that they have, and unless they decide to say, oh, this is a 60-minute level or whatever, but like generally you have half an hour, before you die or before you get out or you don't. And so that's the sort of thing that puts an interesting limit on the types of encounters they can build, right? Of like, how long can this thing really be before you have to like leave, And so with Cryo Archive, they're doing something where like, you can extract without fighting the boss. And so you will need to do runs where you're going in and getting these clearance keys, your DNA stuff all set, whatever it is, the lore key things. And so you're kind of like going in, getting things done, leaving with meaningful loot that will make your next run potentially easier, but also providing you ways to kind of skip some of the things you did on a previous successful run, which I think is pretty interesting. Like what they do with that balance going forward, I think is going to be really neat to see. That's the thing that like I'm like the mind races. Like it's very easy to, like, I was on at least 3 different discords with different groups of friends going like, oh, what if they did this? What if they did? Oh, they should do this and this, and like it's definitely like inspiring a lot of it's taking up a whole lot of thought from a lot of people that I know right now. Like we are all extremely fucking obsessed with it. And you start to think about like, oh, well, what if they, in the next season, if they did this and changed this, there's things they could do here, and they could do this type of encounter, and they could do this. Like there's just a lot of there's a lot of ways to play around with it that I hope that they do, like I think that's the that'll be the rub as they get into like season 2, season 3, season 4, whatever. Is like how many is, if it's just like here's a new map or here's 2 new maps that you basically do the same thing you did in the other ones and we haven't really changed up, like that's fine, because the core of the game is still solid, but it feels like there's a real opportunity, both whether it's new factions with new skill trees and new characters, because it's like every character has their kind of ability loadout and stuff, as well as just like something functionally different to do when you're inside of a run. I think that there's a lot of really neat stuff they could do. And of course, like, again, if you've paid attention to kind of where they seem to be going, or the things they could tap into from previous kind of the original Marathon games, like there's whole factions of enemies that have not surfaced. There's whole different types of conflicts and struggles that could erupt into these maps that would be completely lore appropriate and would make a ton of sense, as well as like filling in some more of the mystery of like what the hell is really going on. And I think that's they're in a pretty good place. I feel like from that perspective, I think they're in a really good place because there's a ton of possibility. If we get to 6 months from now and they haven't cashed in on any of that, that'll be a bummer, and we'll see. But right now, with it being a couple weeks old, it's a great game now, and you see how a really exciting kind of like roadmap or whatever could form out of it, as they kind of tweak it and twist it into a variety of different things. I also put some time into Crimson Desert, which came out last week. This was a game this is a game that is not really on my radar, but like for some reason people were very excited about it. It was sort of a weird situation where I would get questions like on unrelated, like people do this on YouTube all the time. I don't really understand why. Where like they will leave comments that have nothing to do with the video in question, and it'll be like, are you planning on checking out Crimson Desert? And they just felt like bots or something. It's just like, is this genuine? Like at first I thought there's some kind of weird campaign of people trying to go around and are they just mentioning this in comments to try to get awareness built around it? But I looked into it. I was like, oh, right. I couldn't even remember which game it was. I was like, okay, yeah, this is the game from the people that made that MMO with the character creator that people really liked. And I was like, okay, that's that game, right? And the reviews came out and they seemed very mixed. Some people seemed to really enjoy it, and then I don't know. Like, I feel like a lot of the complaints that I saw were like looked very reasonable as someone who had not played the game. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a problem. But the most damning thing about the game that that really blew me away when I started playing it is the way the character feels when you move him. Feels fucking terrible. Like, there is so much latency and delay around, and they patched it, so, you know, maybe it's a little bit better now on jumping, because they did say, like, oh, we're going to make the jumps feel more responsive. And you're like, okay, well, I guess that's something, but it's very much like, when I push to the left, it takes a little bit for him to start to animate and start to move. And normally you'd go like, well, okay, they chose animation and it's a great looking game, and but like, I don't think it's a particularly great looking fucking game. Like, that seemed like that was going to be the thing. Like, you look at the trailers and you're like, oh, that looks like it's very nice, I suppose. But as you look at it up close, you're like, oh, all this facial hair looks like fucking total shit. Like, this looks like a fucking bad ad for a mobile game. When the game opens, you're in the middle of this fucking forest, and all the trees and bushes around you are going fucking nuts. They're just going blah, 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 and you're like, oh, it must be very windy here. But like, none of the characters seem to be feeling like, it just looked broken at first. It was just like, what the hell is happening here? And it's just, yeah, I don't know, man. Structurally, like a lot of that stuff, I think, like, from a control perspective, they get into this thing where it's like, you can do precision jumping. You need to look in a direction and then push a button, and then a little icon will appear, and that's where your jump will land, and then you can push the button to jump. I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? With any kind of DLSS turned on, like, the top 10% of the screen just was this jittery black box, like it looked letterboxed, but only on the top. And it was just like, so just like part of the screen was not showing up at all, and it was this jittery fucked up mess. Which, you know, whatever. Games launch weird, so like, I'm not that's the sort of stuff that you go like, oh, well, that'll probably get fixed, like, whatever. But as I got deeper and deeper into the game and like experienced the combat and some of the quest stuff and the dialogue and speech and all of this stuff, like, you just look at it and go like, this seems fucking terrible. Like, why would anyone want to spend the 100 plus hours it is taking some people to finish this game? It was like, I don't even want to spend 10 hours on this fucking thing. Like, Jesus. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I've, you know, I was hoping like, oh, you know, like, hey, I love me some Dragon's Dogma. And you know, some nice third person action or adventure / RPG-ish sort of thing, I suppose. You're like, yeah, okay, maybe there's something going on here. But boy, boy, is it rough. Legion's Arcade in the chat says, one positive review said the first 8 to 15 hours are terrible. Yeah, don't. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not going to go like, well, if I get over the hump on these first 8 to 15 hours, then I'm going to enjoy this, like the generic nature of the writing, all this sort of stuff. Just like, yeah, I mean, every single bit of it rubbed me the wrong way. The nicest thing in that game is when you first start the game and it goes to a loading screen, there's this bright light in the middle and all of these little cubes, and it's floating towards you, and they're really nice looking cubes. And I looked at it and I thought like, man, I could go for some good ass loading screen. I should be maybe I should go play some Phantasy Star Online. Like, that was my thought upon playing that game. So yeah, man, I don't know. It's an interesting release because I don't know. There seem to be some people. It's like, are these real people or I don't know. There seem to be some like pretty like defensive people about it for a game that like doesn't really have roots in a franchise and all this other stuff. Like there sure were some people being really fucking weird about it, which I don't get, man. Whatever. Anyway, that's out now. It's on consoles as well. And yeah, like I said, the DLSS was like just fucking broken the minute I turned on. Like it has it's one of those things where it's like, this is too many settings that are not explained. It's like, do you want DLSS 4.0? Do you want DLSS 4.5? Do you want DLSS 4.5 L? And I'm like, what the fuck are we even? What is like? And no matter. And anyway, no matter which one I turned on, the top of the screen was just a jittery black box mess. It was all sorts of fucked up. So yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe that's fixed. They have patched. They have put out one patch on PC since then. So hey, maybe that's fixed by now. By the time you hear this, maybe that will be not a problem. I guess like the game also doesn't even it doesn't support Intel GPUs at all, which, for the 9 people that bought a Battle Mage card, that's probably super sucks. But that's a super weird. Like Intel had to get out there and say, like, we sent them all kinds of stuff. We sent them cards and drivers and all this sort of stuff. We supported them very well. And the game just straight up doesn't launch. It just says to me like, oh, it's maybe in some ways a smaller team that had to focus. Like that happens all the time. Teams have to focus on the greatest common denominator in a lot of cases, and the Intel GPU is not on that list. So I can't, like, it's weird. You go like, that's kind of a shitty thing to do, I guess, but like whatever. I assume that they will fix it if they haven't already, and whatever, man, shit happens. But that game, I don't know, like just the content of it looks so generic, like it just had this like, hey, we thought we could make The Witcher all as well, The Witcher TOO, but none of it's good. And like, oh great, okay, nice work on that one, I guess. Yeah, it's just just seems utterly pointless. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll get into the news after this. Standard jeans are such a pain in the ass, man. I mean, look, you're either going into a store and you're getting some typical middle of the mall ass denim, and that never feels good. I don't know. It's either too stiff, it's there's no move, there's no give. On the other end, you got these people out there selling like, these are super stretchy pants. Put them on, they look terrible. They don't feel any better. They're just tight in a different way. That's why you need to get into the perfect jean. That's right. It solves the frustrations with jeans. Jeans, you can get jeans that feel like they're made for your body. Jeans that feel good, that look good, that stretch where it's appropriate without looking like that you just spray painted a pair of sweatpants to look like fake denim. No, man. The perfect jean. Reasonably priced and feels nice. And that's all really, at the end of the day, what more is there, You want some jeans that feel good on your body, that you can wear all day long, that if you're moving around, maybe you're squatting, stretching, moving, you're picking things up, that are going to move with you. You're not going to get squashed and crushed in there in a terrible way. And they still look nice on top of that. That's perfect. That's the perfect jean. You know what I'm saying? Do you want to get into the perfect jean? You do. I know you definitely do. Come back to denim. I know you've been away. I know you're out there. You're going like, well, maybe I'm a khakis kind of guy. No! Come back to real pants. And you can accessorize while you're at it. The perfect jean has den khakis. So if you're looking for like a denim kind of khaki combo that's like real soft, feels real nice, they got that. You're looking for quarter zips. Everyone is these days. I don't know. They got a mid-weight plush brushed quarter zip pullover that's real nice and soft. It's got a 4-way stretch knit to move with you. So, elevate your whole outfit. If it's, still a little chilly where you're at, you might need something like a quarter zip right here before it warms up. Spring's right around the corner. Get it in. Get it in. And now, with the Perfect Jean, you can get this hot deal. That's right. Join the over 500,000 men that have made the switch. Thousands of guys who wore, Levi's or whatever for like 20 years. They're donating their entire collection after trying one pair of the Perfect Jeans. Among the 35,000 plus 5-star reviews, the same phrase used over and over. They are as comfortable as sweatpants. One guy even said, GF can't keep her hands off my butt. Do you want hands on your butt? I mean, even if you don't, these jeans are still real solid. Another guy said, these are the best jeans I've ever owned. This is what actual customers are saying about the Perfect Jean. Right now, you can get a deal. You can get 15% off your first order, plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc, or Google the Perfect Jean. I don't know, just type it into the internet. Either way, use the code Jeff15 for 15% off. Go to theperfectjean.nyc and use the code Jeff15 for 15% off. Nice. All right, let's get into the news. Epic Games is laying off over 1,000 employees. They made this announcement this morning, posting the announcement to their website. These are deep cuts that are touching roles across the entire organization, people that have been there for years, people that, in some cases, that are viewed as load-bearing employees, like people that have been getting it done for a long time. Some of this has been pinned on a downturn in Fortnite numbers, which is backed up by some of the statistics out there. It does seem like that maybe some of the engagement in Fortnite is a little bit lower. Though I think Epic has been blowing money on dumb shit for a while now. All right, here's what they sent out. This was the internal message that they posted to their website. Today we're laying off over 1,000 Epic employees. I'm sorry we're here again. The downturn in Fortnite engagement that started in 2025 means we're spending significantly more than we're making, and we have to make major cuts to keep the company funded. This layoff, together with over $500 million of identified cost savings in contracting, marketing, and closing some open roles, puts us in a more stable place. Some of the challenges we're facing are industry-wide challenges: slower growth, weaker spending, and tougher cost economics. Current consoles selling less than last generations, which is not necessarily something that I think holds up across the board with every one of those consoles. But anyway. And games competing for time against other increasingly engaging forms of entertainment, which is I feel like that's a really fake line to put in there. That's some straight up bullshit. I don't think that over the last year, things that are not games have become so much better that, oh my God, like it just feels like they're looking for things they can blame. And some of our challenges are unique to Epic. Despite Fortnite remaining one of the most successful games in the world, we've had challenges delivering consistent Fortnite magic with every season. We're only in the early stages of returning to mobile and optimizing Fortnite for the world's billions of smartphones. And in being the industry's vanguard, we have taken a lot of bullets in a battle which is only in the early days of paying off for ourselves and all developers. So the thing when they started the fight with Apple, that is why the game is only just now returning to mobile. At the time, they said, "Oh yeah, we got enough money to do this, and yeah, we're doing it for the industry, and we have enough money to make this happen." Much like when they talk about the Epic Store, they're like, "Oh yeah, maybe in years and years and years we'll have to care about it being profitable," but so to suddenly like pull the rug out from over 1,000 people in light of everything they've said about Epic, their own business over the years, I think this is fucked. I think this is some absolute bullshit for this to be the reasoning. Since it's a thing now, I should note, I'll take it back to the letter here. Since it's a thing now, I should note that the layoffs aren't related to AI. To the extent it improves productivity, we want to have as many awesome developers developing great content and tech as we can. What we need to do now is clear: build awesome Fortnite experiences and fresh seasonal content, gameplay, story, and live events. Accelerate developer tools with greater stability and capability as we evolve from Unreal Engine 5 and UEFN to Unreal Engine 6. And we'll be kicking off the next generation of Epic with huge launch plans towards the end of the year. This isn't our first time being here. Epic survived upheavals in the 90s with the move from 2D to 3D with Unreal 1. In the 2000s, building console games with Gears of War, and in 2012, moving to online gaming with Paragon and Fortnite. Each time we've rebuilt our foundations and earned a renewed leadership position. Market conditions today are the most extreme we've seen since those early days, with massive upheaval in the industry accompanied by massive opportunity for the companies that come out as winners on the other side. That's what we're aiming to do for our players, and we aim to bring other like-minded developers in the industry along on the journey to build an increasingly open and vibrant future of entertainment together. What? At Epic, we pride ourselves in only hiring the industry's best, so it is very painful to part with so many talented people. The folks impacted by the layoffs will receive a severance package that includes at least 4 months of base pay, with more based on tenure. We're also extending Epic paid healthcare coverage. For example, in the US, they'll receive paid coverage for 6 months. We also accelerate stock options vesting through January 2027 and extend equity exercise options for up to 2 years. We'll have a company meeting on Thursday to talk about the roadmap in more detail. That's attributed to Tim Sweeney, who is the head of Epic. I think it's I think that Epic's business has been shaky is not the word, but it feels like they've spent a lot of years chasing after businesses they want to be in and not doing it very well. For the most part. Specifically, I would say that the Epic Store, they started their own publishing business. They published Alan Wake 2. They published Rumbleverse for a minute there. They tried to get out into these other businesses and tried to make stuff happen. They, in the early days of Fortnite, they shut down a lot of stuff. When Fortnite became successful, they killed that Unreal Tournament game that they were going to, that they were in the process of like kind of maybe thinking about developing. There was the J.J. Abrams stuff that there was that Match 3 game. There's just like a bunch of weird stuff that they did back then that sort of got swept under the rug as soon as Fortnite took off. And as Fortnite, it feels like in some ways they've taken their eye off the ball with Fortnite. To where, and maybe this is the right move. This is potentially the right move for them. You could certainly make the argument that Fortnite needed a variance that it did not have before. But, remember that Fortnite turned into like a bad Roblox, as they attempted to sort of navigate the, what would have eventually been a downturn in Fortnite anyway, because battle royales are only going to last so many years, right? They started pouring more and more effort into this like third party, the UEFN, you can make your own stuff inside of Fortnite, and we're going to make our own games. They had their rocket racing thing, the Lego stuff that they put in recently. That's, that stuff's still there. And then users made a bunch of like dog shit, awful obstacle courses the same way they do in Roblox. Come check out my cool obby. Yeah, these suck, dude. These all suck. These are bad jumping puzzles in a game that was not built for it. Congratulations. Your obby rules, dog. So yeah, there was obviously going to be something that was probably going to have to change, but I do think that the Epic Store, their store business has been, to hear them tell it, they would say it's like lightly profitable, it does turn something of a profit. So yeah, at least they got there. But from a features perspective, the Epic Store is not good. They're taking less of a cut than other stores in the game are taking, which maybe if they had taken 30% off those guys, then maybe these 1,000 people still have jobs. I don't know. Like it's never as directly related to that, I guess. But the store stuff has seemed like, superfluous at best, and a way for them to try to, get monetize the Fortnite audience further. Look at what they did. They went from, hey, we're running a store and we're going to sell all these other games on it, to like, oh, what if we just turned Fortnite into Roblox and people could sell games in there? What if we instead did that, which I think undercuts their store business in a weird way. And it's just, I don't know. It's a weird company. Also, think about the engine business. They don't really get into specifics. I mean, they do say that there's a downturn in Fortnite engagement. They do not say that fewer people are using Unreal Engine or anything like that. But they do talk about industry-wide challenges and whatever. Like, fewer big games are being made. The Unreal Engine was the engine that big developers chose for a lot of their big games. And a lot of the studios that made the choice of, like, hey, we want to do, we're going to use Unreal to do this. Like, the Midways of the world, where all of their games were Unreal Engine, like all of that stuff has sort of dried up, or some of that stuff has dried up. Smaller developers used to use Unity, and Unity shit the bed in 9 different ways. Unity shit the bed in ways that make this Epic announcement seem like coherent and cool by comparison. Like fucking Unity has been fucking it up big time for a good long time. To the point where a lot of people are out there using Godot now, but a lot of smaller developers are maybe not choosing the Unreal Engine. Some still are, because the terms are still what they are, but like, that end of the business has changed dramatically as well. So, there's just a lot of stuff that I do think is kind of ganging up on Epic. Maybe they shouldn't have blown all their money on a lawsuit with Apple. I don't know. Like, maybe they should have got off their high horse and said, like, maybe this isn't our fight to fight, or maybe it's not our fight to fight alone, and maybe we need some more folks in this fight. It's the sort of thing that I look at and go, like, I think that Epic is correct when they have this fight with Apple and Google. When it comes to fighting back against some of these walled gardens and some of these cuts that some of these companies have been taking, like, yeah, they're probably right to want to push back against that, but also the way that I think Tim Sweeney in particular was so cavalier about this lawsuit that did not fully go Epic's way. They cracked a little bit of daylight into these storefronts that they're able to kind of get through and use, but by and large, Apple and Google defended themselves reasonably well there, and did not have to give up all that much. So at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, like, that lawsuit seems like it was a mistake, especially when you contrast it with the way that Tim Sweeney is talking now, and the way that he talked about that lawsuit when it was happening, when he was like, oh yeah, we got plenty of money to fight, we're the good guys and we're going to do this, and like, now look at you. Did you think the Fortnite money was going to last forever? Did you literally think that Fortnite was we ain't never coming down? Was that Tim Sweeney? Is he popping bottles at the club and going, we up forever, baby? Like, what? I don't, like, what? So yeah, I just, like, I look at this stuff and it just seems like incredibly boneheaded. You just kind of look at it and go, like, this doesn't, like, this stuff, you've watched this happen for a long time, and a guy like Tim Sweeney has, as he says, they've been in this position before. What did you learn from it? Apparently jack shit, Tim. I don't know. Like, it's interesting in a way, and I because, like, I think it's very fascinating. The idea that Fortnite engagement is down is maybe not the worst thing in the world for the rest of the video game industry. I think that these people getting laid, I think that's a fucking horrible situation. But I also think that Epic has like positioned itself in some really bad ways and gotten into some questionable businesses that you could look at it from afar when they were happening. Not now on the other end of the layoffs, but at the time you're like, I don't know. The story I always heard about working at Epic, also on top of all this, is that it was hard because they didn't hire up. They didn't hire a ton of people. That it was always like you felt a little short-staffed. You felt like you always needed some more people, but that Epic tried to run lean or whatever, and so their profit per person was, this and that, and that was good for different other metrics and whatever. And so it was like, hey, here's this really good, well-paying job. You're going to work yourself to death, but hey, here's a really good, well-paying job. And so to be on the other end of this thing, where now they are laying off 1,000 people and trying to say like, oh, we need to do this for the safety of Epic going forward. Like, really? There were no signs on this before now? This is the first thing this is it? This is the thing you needed to do? You just look at it and go like, I don't know, man. Like it seems like you, but I guess like the signs were there. Like everything that Fortnite has been doing has looked like a scramble to me. Has looked like oh shit. Like all of the UEFN stuff, the rolling in Harmonix's stuff, rolling in the having the Rocket League developer, like the racing thing they did, which is being shut down, by the way. We'll get into that in a sec. Like a lot of that has looked like a scramble for like, oh, we've got to figure out how to turn this from a battle royale into a platform, or else we are ultra fucked. So yeah, I don't know, like the when they talk about turning the corner, or they talk about like, we're only in the early stages of returning to mobile and optimizing Fortnite for the world's billions of smartphones. Like, really? No one shipped Unreal Engine games on phones, but between here and there, you don't have any expertise in that at all? Like, it just, like, the excuses do not hold up to me. And to blame, that's a self-inflicted wound. And say some of our challenges are unique to Epic. We're only in the early stages of returning to mobile. We've taken a lot of bullets in a battle that is only in the early days of paying off for ourselves and all developers. Nice work. Like, you fought that battle and you got to the other side of it, and now it's going to pay off for you. Unfortunately, you took your eye off the ball with Fortnite, and now Fortnite is not doing the numbers it used to do. So will you lose more? Would you have lost more money by paying Apple and Google the 30%, or will you lose more money by Fortnite falling off? I mean, both would have happened eventually, I guess, right? And I'm sure the answer to that would be like, well, it was a fight and we needed to have it. And like, yeah, guys, puff your chest out for the lawsuit you had that you didn't, you did not win outright. And yeah, man. What a weird fucking business. There's a lot of good smart people at Epic, and there are a lot of good smart people that are now no longer at Epic, but there are still people there that are extremely fucking intelligent. And I bet all of this is frustrating. I bet working with Tim Sweeney is a very frustrating thing. How about that? And by bet, I mean, yeah. Uh-huh. Like, you see the stuff he puts out externally. Imagine working with him day to day. Imagine having to be like one of the many people says, no, Tim, that's not how it works. Imagine having to be that person. Like, boy. Also today, this morning, around this same time, the Fortnite status account on Twitter posted a big long thing Rocket Racing, Ballistic, and Festival Battle Stage are going to be taken offline. Rocket Racing was the driving game that was like, you know, okay, like for a driving game that lived inside of Fortnite, it was like, oh, this is okay. Yeah, okay. Ballistic was their kind of whatever Counter-Strike ripoff. And Festival Battle Stage, I don't remember what, I mean, Festival is the rock band, is the music stuff, but I don't exactly remember what Festival Battle Stage is because they have a few different modes with that. Anyway. Let's see here. We've built a lot of Fortnite modes, and in some cases, we failed to build something awesome enough to attract and retain a large player base. We're going to shut these modes down on the schedules outlined below. We're grateful for everyone who played. Rocket Racing. After 2 years of high-speed competition, Rocket Racing will leave Fortnite along with all UEFN islands built with Rocket Racing templates in October 2026. Starting next week, Rocket Racing quests will no longer be available. The current track creation template will be removed. No further ranked rewards planned for this season. You can still use your customized cars in Fortnite. For developers building car content in April, we're adding car physics, hazards, and track building tools, including the track spline tool and speed boost devices to the base UEFN tool set. Developers will also be able to build custom racing islands with jumps, boost, and drifting. Before October, developers will be able to move compatible Rocket Racing content over to standalone UEFN islands. So they're going to yank whatever car stuff out of the Rocket Racing specific templates that they have for creators there and try to centralize them into just mainline UEFN. So you'll be able to migrate a lot of that stuff over, but it sounds like their own Rocket Racing game mode is going away. Ballistic will be removed from Fortnite April 16th. You can still play and rank up in Ballistic during its final weeks. For developers, first-person shooter tools in UEFN remain available, and FPS creator islands will continue to be supported. In order for developers to build modes like Ballistic, more UEFN features will be required, such as custom weapon support, ranked support, and additional matchmaking features, which they do not go on to say, and we're making those. They just say, yeah, if you want to build something like Ballistic, it's going to need stuff. Fortnite Festival consists of 3 music modes: Festival Main Stage, which is 1 band with teams up to 4 playing the Note Highway rhythm game; Festival Jam Stage, which is the social island with casual music emoting; and Festival Battle Stage, a PvP game where 4 teams of 4 players play Note Highway rhythm gameplay competitively. The Battle Stage competitive mode will go offline April 16th. We will continue to improve Festival Main Stage and Jam Stage and the music features that are available everywhere in Fortnite. So the harmonics stuff will live on in the modes that people were actually engaging with. But Festival Battle Stage will be going away. I don't know. Like, I feel like even without these layoffs, like, that's not surprising. Like, when they rolled all those modes out, when they rolled out Rocket Racing and the Lego thing and tried to kind of like kickstart the kind of games within Fortnite thing, like Rocket Racing seemed like something that you play it a few times and you go like, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I don't know. That's not a drive. There are other driving games I would rather play than that one. That's for sure. So I guess I can't be too surprised. Ballistic, as their kind of like, you know, bootleg Counter-Strike thing, that never seemed like it had a chance. Like, just like, does the Fortnite audience even want this? Like, this seems a little too serious for some of those players, but also not serious. Like, you should just play CS2. If you want that, you should just go get it. Go get it where it lives. Leave the Epic client. I know it's such a popular place. Everyone loves the Epic store, but if you look outside it, trust me, maybe you too could get into gambling. So yeah, I don't think that this signals the end of Fortnite. Obviously, I think that Fortnite is still a very big game. It is still one of the biggest games on consoles, engagement wise, and whatever else. But you know, when you take this in conjunction with the They raised prices for V-Bucks very, very recently. It doesn't seem like Fortnite is in the best place. And, you know, some of the language used in that letter is like, hey, we have failed to deliver consistent Fortnite magic with every season, which, you know, no one's going to hit all the time. I wonder how, you know, like, I wonder how well some of the guest stuff monetized. Like, people had a ton of really nice things to say about the Simpsons thing, but I don't actually know. Like, did that make them a lot of money? Like, I don't know. I don't know that I've seen anything specific around, like, did people actually go and spend money on that or not? But yeah, I don't know. Like, people should move on and not just play Fortnite anyway. Like, people should move on and not just play Roblox. People should play a variety of games from a variety of places for their own sanity, as well as the health of video games. I don't know. Ubisoft continues to be Ubisoft. They last week it was figured out that development at Red Storm Entertainment was going to be shut down. Red Storm is the studio, I guess, mainly known for the Rainbow Six games originally, right? I mean, they existed for a lot of years past that and became sort of a support studio for some games, but also, like, were instrumental in getting some games off the ground and, like, hey, we're gonna do some early tests with this. Like, Red Storm became a studio that kind of became known for a lot of that. Insider Gaming is reporting that that Red Storm was working on 10 games when at the time of the layoffs. You know, like that. A lot of folks were laid off from Red Storm, like, percentage wise. You know, not as many as Epic, obviously, but that they had 10 projects in the works. This is, again, according to Insider Gaming. They say that the studio is working on seasonal content for Rainbow Six Siege, the next mainline Ghost Recon game, currently known as Project OVR, Brawlhalla, Beyond Good and Evil 2, a smaller scale Rainbow Six game called Slice and Dice, Splinter Cell. They were doing audio for the Division 2. They were doing concept work for the Division 3. They were doing support for Watch Dogs Director's Cut, and another unannounced project that's currently in the concept stage. It goes on to say that, you know, that basically now they're kind of a snowdrop support studio. Like, they still will be helping out other studios on games and stuff, but to a much lesser degree, because they will not have nearly as many people to do that work. So it's a damn shame, man. Red Storm, you know, Red Storm kind of went through the ringer, right? I mean, anything owned by Ubisoft did, right? The entire company went through a series of ringers. They're not done. I think there are still several ringers for Ubisoft and its associated studios to go through before they maybe emerge on the other side. Maybe. But that is a publisher that feels like they are not done. Not done at all. And Red Storm, it's unfortunate, man. Red Storm is a name that was on so many classic fucking PC games. You know, just in you know, obviously, like, Rainbow Six is a very different thing now than it was then. The Clanciverse is a very different thing now than it was then. But yeah, that's a bummer for sure. Over 100 people laid off last week at Red Storm. I mean, let's keep the cheery news coming here. Nintendo is reportedly cutting the number of Switch 2 consoles it is manufacturing by over 30%, according to Bloomberg. Basically, here, they said they were going to make 6 million units, and now they're going to make 4 for this quarter. Cutting back on that production seems to be, well, I don't know. You know, throw a rock, you could hit an excuse or hit a solid reason for why they might be doing that. A slowdown in sales, partially, at least here in the States, but also costs to manufacture are going up. And yeah, so they're going to be extra tight on that stuff to try to figure out what's the best and most cost-effective way to make a Nintendo Switch 2. But Bloomberg does report that the number is for this quarter. So they originally it was going to be 6 million, and they intend to make 4 million this quarter. But that reduced output will carry through into next quarter, which starts in April. So so it does seem like that's a go forward adjustment as to how many of those they're going to be making. Which, you know, it has not been difficult to find a Nintendo Switch 2. Not that it should be, but I'm sure that there's you know, some supply and demand things to reconcile there. I don't think this will necessarily lead directly to the Switch 2 being difficult to find or whatever, but in this environment with a bunch of fucking random, probably illegal tariffs still being levied here in the States, along with data center madness and what that's doing to prices for RAM and storage and everything else. Like it's a perfect storm of the dumbest fucking people making the dumbest possible decisions in ways that are fucking over a lot of different industries. Hey, is there any plastic used in the manufacture of the Switch 2? Because that's probably all going to go up now for the Strait of Hormuz closed. Like, you know, was it like DuPont or Dow? Or, you know, like somebody was out there saying, "Hey, our cost of goods for plastic is about to go up." So, yeah, Dow Packaging and Specialty Plastics. Their price per pound is doubling as of April 1st. So anyone manufacturing with plastic is probably going to be getting fucked over by the war. Fuck, man. So yes, so more to come on that front. More winning to come. If you're not tired of it yet, the winning will continue. The Nintendo thing, I don't know, like there are a lot of people pulling some real sky is falling type shit around the potential of them not making as many Switch 2s as they said they were going to. I think that's I would look at this more of an industry problem than a Nintendo problem, and that they are still selling a console that is still like what the number 2 fastest selling console of all time. So if anything, I think those things sort of indicate that like they've got the supply under control. They don't need to make quite as many, and they probably will still be able to satisfy demand, especially as the economics and all of the other stuff happening around the world are making it such that getting a Switch 2 is that shit is expensive. So yeah. This led to a hit on Nintendo's stock, which wiped out some of the gains that they had based on the launch of Pokemon Pokopia, which sold quite well out of the gate. But hey, stock prices are fucking fake anyway. Borderlands 4 is in the news. But before we get to that, let's take one more break. And we'll come back. If that's not a tease, I don't know what is. You got to stick around because after this, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite Borderlands 4, right? That's how that works. Stay tuned. Are you in a constant struggle with your underwear? Are your underwear working against you every second of the day? Is your underwear trying to jump you in an alley and mess your whole thing up? It's time to make a change. It's time for MeUndies. It's time for the MeUndies Ball Caddy Boxer Briefs. They have a contoured pouch that keeps everything in place. No squishing, no sticking. They've got ultra soft micro-modal fabric that feels broken in from day one. It feels like it's breathing and you're not overheating. Get rid of your old underwear. Burn them. If you, donate. I don't know. Maybe you donate and use underwear. Maybe. Depending on how old they are. You got a bunch of blown out pairs of underwear in your drawer. I know you do. I know you do. It's time for the ultimate upgrade with MeUndies. MeUndies has a cut for all of you out there with 10 different styles, boxer briefs, jock straps. They got this signature ball caddy thing that's very nice, designed to keep everything in place. That ultra modal fabric is breathable, stretchy, very cozy. It's perfect for all day wear. Yeah, I know. If you're looking to wear your underwear all day long, these are the underwear for you. No matter what you're doing, I don't know, you're going to like one meeting after another, or you're going to the gym, it can handle either end of the spectrum. They use sustainably sourced materials. They work with partners that care for their workers. And if you're not happy with your first pair of undies, it's on MeUndies. That's right. Their problem-free philosophy is ready for you. They have sold more than 30 million pairs of underwear. They have 90,000 five-star reviews. Guys everywhere are making the switch. And right now, you can get a hot deal. Do you want to get 20% off your first order? You can. To get 20% off your first order plus free shipping, go to MeUndies.com/Jeff and use the promo code Jeff. That's 20% off plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/Jeff. Promo code Jeff. You may remember that when Borderlands 4 launched, it was saddled with a lot of performance issues. That people were not happy with the way that the game was running on PC. This had a number of knock-on effects. It led to a whole lot of ridiculous tweets from the head of the studio. Where he said, this is a premium game. This is a hobby grade video game, and you need a hobby grade computer to, whatever. Anyway, the folks over at Gearbox have posted, notably not Randy Pitchford, because there are other people who work there that are just trying to get their goddamn job. They have issued an update to talk about where they're at with regards to performance and whatever. And I find it's a really interesting, it's maybe not a great, they were not in an awesome spot, right? But they're putting out charts and graphs here in March, months after the release of the game. But they have been optimizing the game. They say they have improved the average frames per second by approximately 20% across the board. Greatly improved stability, fewer crashes, all of this other stuff. So they're kind of getting out and saying like, hey, the game's in a better place now. And again, they've got like a bunch of bar graph like and charts saying like, okay, when the game launched, if you were using upscaled 1080p set to low, you were getting 53 frames per second, and now you're getting 67. If you're on a 4080 at launch at 1440p on very high, you were getting 54 as an average FPS, and now you're getting 78. They really don't. They just kind of say, hey, it's combined efforts of optimization across GPU, CPU, and general efficiency, with the optimization team identifying specific refinements to improve performance without being too noticeable in terms of visual fidelity. They say they've reduced stuttering and hitching with shaders and such. And that they've gone through and optimized the visuals, lighting, and UI. I think it's really crazy that we're getting this type of breakdown about a game's performance months after its release. I'll say, and again, I'm on a PC that is quite a bit above their recommended settings, and so I didn't quite experience the performance issues the same way that a lot of other people did, but it was sort of a situation where it's like, yeah, this is a lot of stuff that like it doesn't run fantastic, but it runs well enough. And I don't know, the shader stuff, like I guess in my situation, it was quite a bit worse pre-release. Reviewing that game before it came out, when they first sent it out, it was not running well. And then after a couple of patches, like, and the shader compilation stuff was taking forever, and the game was hitchy with all the shader loading in and everything. Like, that stuff was real bad. But by the time they got to launch day, they had made significant improvements to that part of the process. And so I think I had a bit of a skewed perspective on it, where I was like, you think this is bad? You should have seen it 2 weeks ago, man. Like, it was real fucked up. But they have continued to chip away at it. I think this is interesting because they are sticking with it. Obviously, they have a lot of DLC planned. Obviously, I think they're used to Borderlands games having kind of a long tail and doing well in sales after the fact, or bundles, whether it's like a game of the year, or, you know, hey, here's our game of the year. Yeah. We're bundling up our DLC and selling it to you in some kind of bundle or whatever. Like, Borderlands traditionally kind of has its peaks of sales and other stuff in the years following its release. So, you know, they certainly could not afford to fire and forget with this game and just put it out and like, I don't know, we'll make some changes and whatever. So it's probably good that they're A, doing this at all, and B, kind of getting out there and saying stuff about it. I also, so the other thing that happened, the kind of knock-on effect of this performance problem here on PC, was that this led to the Switch 2 version kind of going away. It wasn't necessarily that it was canceled. It was that work on it had been put on hold, and they were using the optimization discussion as a way to say, like, hey, yeah, the Switch 2 version, we'll yeah. And it kind of vanished from everyone's schedule. The game, and it left a lot of people wondering, like, is the Switch 2 version of Borderlands 4 going to come out at all? Which is a crazy thing, a crazy situation to be in, considering they had showed that game off publicly. That game was damn close to done. That game, you know, like, did it perform super smooth, amazingly well in every situation on the Switch 2? Like, probably not. I think the people that saw it at, like, PAX, you know, like, the reports were like, yeah, it's got some issues here and there, but, you know, like, it, for a game running on a handheld or whatever, it was not out of line with how that should probably go. And so, like, it didn't sound like it was some dire situation. Anyway, let's say I am confident that once they are done with this work, they will eventually put out the Switch 2 version of that game. I do believe that this game will still see store shelves for Switch 2 at some point, because they did way too much work on it to not. And maybe this work will help with some of that. I don't know. You know, if they're doing kind of general optimization across a lot of different specs and stuff, maybe that is something that will sort of apply to the Switch 2 version of the game anyway. I don't really know. But I do feel like that version of the game will resurface, I guess I would say, eventually here. But yeah, I don't. It's a much different tone, and you know, like, on some level, I think people forget about that stuff. But, like, I think the tone that they took at launch, by basically trying to, like, blame people for not having good enough PCs and all of this stuff, especially in a market where that stuff is only getting, like, even when this game was launching, obviously, like, things were getting more expensive already. GPUs were already in a bad place. Like, the RAM thing hadn't quite manifested to the degree that it has now, but I think to get out there and say you need a better computer at a time when that stuff is going crazy and your game is clearly facing some real optimization issues is a shitty look. You know? I think a lot of what a Randy Pitchford type guy does, a Randy Pitchford shaped individual does, is, like, he can be the kind of dartboard for fans, for people out there on the internet to, like, attack, because that keeps the heat off the rest of the team so that they can get their job done and do their thing. I think that that's a genuine I think that is like in turn, I do think that that's what he is attempting to do with some of that stuff. He is trying to kind of keep the heat off of the rest of Gearbox so that he can take those hits. But I think there's a way to take those hits without sounding crazy. And I think there's a way to take those hits without making the people who just bought your game feel dumb. And I think that this time for Borderlands 4 specifically, I think that he did not thread that needle super well. Which is interesting because now they're wholly owned by 2K, and so he's not as independent as he was last time he got up to these types of shenanigans, which was interesting. As a career move, maybe not I don't know, whatever. It seems like that Gearbox is getting there with this game. That eventually backs into a conversation of just like, should you play Borderlands 4? And I don't know that I think the answer to that question is yes. Because of the way that game is structured. You could go back and listen. Most of what I said then about just the overall quality of that game, I think still holds up. I wrote about it, all of that sort of stuff. I think that Borderlands 4 is significantly better than Borderlands 3, and that's an incredibly low bar. I think they came up with some new ideas that the game doesn't fully take advantage of in ways that make it fun or engaging. And I don't think that making the game run 20% better fixes that. But they probably have years of DLC lined up for this thing, and and even in a world where Borderlands is not as popular as it used to be, it's still popular enough for them to stick to their plans and continue with that DLC. So yeah. Xbox is going to be having an event on Thursday. They're going to show some third-party video games. They're calling it the Xbox Partner Preview. They have a handful of games pre-announced for this thing. They are going to show Stranger Than Heaven, which is the new game from the Yakuza team, the Yakuza studio, I guess, because some of the Yakuza team went out to get that NetEase money that apparently isn't there anymore. Anyway, Stranger Than Heaven is the game that's like set in 1915, and people are not immediately sure if it is set in the same universe as the Like a Dragon franchise or not. It probably is. They will also show The Expanse. The Expanse Osiris Reborn. So if you are the Osiris of this shit, congratulations, you are about to be reborn. I'm just making sure that The Expanse is the game that I think it is. The Expanse is the game that the trailers all look like a knockoff Mass Effect, and it is set in a universe that there are books. There are books set in this same universe. And it looks like it could be potentially interesting. No, you're right. That's Exodus. I am wrong. Exodus is the thing based on the book. The Expanse is, what the fuck is The Expanse? It's a TV show? Okay, sure. Well, all right. So Exodus is this another game that looks like kind of a weird fake Mass Effect then? What the fuck is going on? I mean, good. Like, people should make bootleg Mass Effect games. Because I have zero faith in Mass Effect as a thing. Okay, The Expanse was announced last year at the Future Games Show, and Owlcat Games is doing it. It is an action RPG based on The Expanse, which is a television show. Exodus is a different game that is out early 2027. And that is the one based on books. They are taking pre-orders for a book called Exodus, the Helium Sea. And And so that game is out early next year. That is the game that game looks more Mass Effect-y than this Expanse game does, I guess. Apologies for the confusion, but fucking video games, man. I don't know. Anyway, they will show more of the Expanse at this thing on Thursday. As well as an update on Stalker 2, which I assume means that they are going to have some sort of Stalker DLC type stuff to show or whatever, right? There will be other games there apparently, but those are the ones they are talking about now. It will be a 30-minute presentation, but they do say brand new reveals and world premieres will be there on Thursday, so we'll have to see what they've got on store in store there. From first party, they went ahead and announced Minecraft Dungeons 2. They had a Minecraft event. According to videogameschronicle.com, there was some kind of Minecraft event where they said that they're going to do a Minecraft theme park in the United Kingdom and also Minecraft Dungeons 2. This is going to be coming to multi-platform. So PC, Xbox, PlayStation 5, Switch, and Switch 2. New locations, encounters, and loot. This is an all-new action RPG adventure where you'll take on high-stakes encounters, thrilling challenges, and explore never-before-seen locations in the Minecraft universe. Disorder is brewing. Don't I know it? Man, disorder is brewing. Understatement of the fucking year. I would be very up for a sequel to Minecraft Dungeons because Minecraft Dungeons 1 was a neat game that kind of lost steam. It was you know, like the end of that game, it needed more. It's a game that would have benefited from more variety, a few more options or whatever. But as far as like, hey, we wanted to try to make this kind of Minecraft action RPG type thing, like it was neat. Some of the loot was cool. Like it had some kind of cool stuff. And so I would be certainly interested in checking out a sequel to that. Let's see here. This is kind of breaking-ish sort of news here from the layoffs department. This is apparently PlayStation is closing Dark Outlaw Games, which is the studio that was announced right here on this very podcast, being helmed by Jason Blundell, who formerly was of Treyarch and Deviation Games. You know, he had done some stuff and was kind of like the face of zombies at Treyarch for a little bit there around the Black Ops 3 time frame. From Jason Schreier on Blue Sky, PlayStation's closing Dark Outlaw Games, a studio formed last year by former Call of Duty lead Jason Blundell. PlayStation is also making other cuts, including in mobile development, around 50 people laid off. So yeah, when we spoke last year, that was just about a year ago, because that was right around GDC time, if I remember right. Like they were kind of timing the announcement to around GDC. I think it was one of those things where like they, you know, didn't have much to show from a game, but they want to hire up and hire people. And so, you know, you kind of need to get out there and say, hey, we exist and we're making a thing, come work with us. And so fuck, man, this is the kind of the second time that a PlayStation affiliated studio with Blundell involved has been shut down. Deviation Games was working on a project, and then when that shut down, like it kind of the way that thing went south seemed very strange. Like it definitely seemed like the founders, it was that situation where a bunch of people worked together for a lot of years, and then they start their own thing, and then it falls apart, and then they don't talk anymore, and you're like, oh, okay, All right. Yeah. I think some shit happens, man. It's life. The stuff around deviation was never really fully made clear, but PlayStation felt strongly enough about him and his work, at least, that they were willing to give him another shot and start another studio around him, or have him lead another studio. So, well, shit. That's sort of, hey, we talk about PlayStation, we talk about some of the choices they're making and some of the decisions they seem to be making around, something like hey, we're putting these games on PC. Hey, we're not putting these games on PC. Like, it really seems like that there has been an effort internally at PlayStation to really take a look at what the fuck they're doing, and decide what it is they're going to do from here. A leadership change just causes that, right? When you've got, someone like Jim Ryan moving on, and all of that, like, someone new steps into the role and they sit down and they take a look at it and they go, okay, this strategy we're on is bad. My strategy is the good strategy. Trust me, bro. My strategy is good. Here's what we're going to do instead. And so things change rapidly. Mason asks, could this be because of Sony shifting away from live service? Like, Sony kind of shifted away from live service a while ago. They just didn't come out and say it. They just kind of went about their business. I think that, they're right to want to have some live service games, because I think that they could, if they do it right, they do it right, But I do think when they got out there and said, hey, we've got 12 games in the works or whatever, 12 live service games, like, that's the wrong way to do it. And so I think that it's more of a strategic shift based on just how the industry is receiving those games, and probably a long, hard look at where a lot of those games are in development and how much they're likely to cost. And so part of it is probably a shift. I think that, when you have someone new in the seat, what is it? His name is Hiroki Totoki. Sorry. He became the interim PlayStation CEO in April of 2004. So, or I'm 24, in April of 2024. And so that's kind of like the end of Jim Ryan's reign. Like, Herman Hulst is still there doing stuff, kind of on the software side of things, but like, Jim Ryan was out. They brought in Totoki, who's the head of all of it, but they made him interim CEO. He made himself interim CEO, I guess, for a bit there. And I do think that it really is just a factor of, like, the people in charge now are probably people a little bit closer to the Japanese end of the business than Jim Ryan was. And they're probably going to have different thoughts strategically about where the brand should be, where the efforts should be, where the money should be being spent, or the types of projects they should be chasing after. And so I do think that, like, that's probably why you would see some of these live service games get killed. But Totoki, they brought in, it's there is a new, like, he is not the, it's Nishino. Hideaki Nishino was announced January 2025. And Nishino was kind of in a joint position with Hulst for a while. I found a Eurogamer story about it, but Nishino kind of became the guy as the sole CEO, and Hulst is still running like the software end of things. I think is probably how they distribute that. But when you get someone new in the chair, you're going to see changes, right? And Holst is obviously still a very high up person in that organization, and I'm sure, you know, I don't think Nishino came in and said like, now that I'm the only CEO, I'm taking over software. Like, no, like Holst is probably reporting to Nishino and largely managing software and all of that stuff is probably how they broke that up. I would have to dig into it a little more, which I'm not going to do right now. But yes, Holst is running studios, and Nishino's running the overall business. And so I think that when you think about, this is a company that is on the verge of the PlayStation 6. You know, they are moving in that direction. They are moving in the direction, like, so they need staples. They don't just need 12 live service games, which was always a foolish kind of way to get into that business in the first place. They need a fucking game where you run and jump and attack dudes with a Marvel character. They need, you know, they need fucking bread and butter ass video games to fill out the portfolio for a PlayStation 6. And so it can't just be about, hey, we've got Bungie, we've got the Fair Games, we got, you know, like all these other, it can't be that live service push. It just doesn't make any sense at this time. Those games, if they had shipped probably in the original schedule when everyone was thinking about it, then maybe that would have happened. But, like, you know, a handful of those games made it out the other end. Marathon, that Horizon game will presumably not get canceled, at least pre-release. And, you know, some other things will probably come to be. But, again, when you think about the news about PlayStation backing off of PC ports, which seems to be absolutely true. And you think about some of the games that have been canceled and some of the live service push that you don't really hear about anymore. And you think about kind of where Sony is, both on the hardware and on the software front. They need to get their shit together for next year. Not to say it's not. I don't know. You know, I don't know how much of it is together or not together, but like they need to be pushing. Like basically they're at a point now where just about every studio that isn't already working on a PS5 game needs to be pushing in the direction of PlayStation 6. Because that thing is not that far off. Presumably some studios have been pushing on that for a while now. Because if that thing truly is going to ship sometime next year, which we'll see, then yeah, you know, what are you going to do? I think what they will do is that anything that is not out yet for PlayStation 5, let's assume PlayStation 6 is out, you know, late next year, right? I assume that any game that is not out on PS5 yet will probably, if not get a specific PS6 SKU of its own, will receive some kind of backwards compatibility upgrade when the PS6 comes out, because they will need to fill up that catalog as quickly as they possibly can. And they have a lot of studios that are working on announced video games right now. So, we will see how all of that comes together. I don't know, man. Like that doesn't, like, as I say all of that out loud, none of that sounds particularly exciting. Like, hey, do you want to buy another console so it can run these PlayStation 5 games a little bit better? When I think about the slate of PS5 games right now, between here and there, and you know, it's like, not especially. Not really. I don't know. Like, I don't, you know what, you know, Wolverine looks like it's something that would probably be cool. Is that something that would benefit dramatically from more hardware? You know, like the difference between PS5 and PS5 Pro is not always dramatic, right? And so PS6 gets what? A significant bump up in tech for better ray tracing, PSSR 3 for better upscaling, you know, I think when we look at like the last generation or two of GPUs on the PC side and kind of use that as an indicator of like where this stuff's likely to go, you know, none of that is going to be earth-shaking, mind-blowing fucking, you know, you're not going to get your asshole blown out by PlayStation 6 graphics. You're going to look at it and go, okay. Yeah, that does, I mean, yeah, I guess that does look better. So I, you know, like that whole thing I think is really, I don't know, like how do you sell that system? And you sell it with exclusive games that are not going to come to PC. You know, that feels like the bet that they're trying to make. But also when do they stop making PS5 games? When do they start making games that only come out on PlayStation 6? I think that's sort of a weird situation as well. And if we continue to assume that the PlayStation 6 offering will be two machines, one console, one handheld, and that the handheld is less powerful than a PlayStation 5, then why would you ever shut down PS5 development? If you're already going to have to make games for something that is less powerful than a PS5, you might as well continue to support the PS5 as long as you can, as long as it's not like a huge problem, right? But if you're already designing for multiple SKUs, multiple specs, multiple whatevers, you don't necessarily need the PS5 to go away. And in fact, I think a lot of people who bought a PS5 that feel like, man, there sure haven't been as many of these as I thought there was going to be. Those might be the players that don't buy a PS6 for a good long time because they felt like maybe they got kind of burned last time out. So does that mean you need to make PS5 games for the next 5 years? I do not know. I don't have a good answer to that. It is kind of the fascinating thing about where PlayStation has ended up by virtue of them not really doing much to change up their business. Whereas the Xbox business looks completely different than it did at the start of this generation, right? When we look at the road that they're on, and some of that is, you know, not by choice, but, you know, shit happens. But at least you can look at the Xbox business and go, well, that's very different. That's a very different proposition. The box you want to sell me now seems like a very different thing than the last one you tried to sell me. So at least they've got that going for them. Whether that's compelling or not, who the fuck, you know, hey. Yes, the Bouncer 2. Yes, let's get a sequel to the... If we can get analog buttons back on these controllers, that'd be something. not necessarily a good something, but that'd be something. Alma asks, do you have any faith that they will ever make smaller, weird games again? PlayStation specifically? Sure. I yes and no. I think that by their very nature, the games have become too expensive. And so maybe this is the other weird problem you run into around PS6, because I think all of this is converging at the same time. If the PS6 comes out and suddenly all the games that come out on it are like 8 to 10 hours long, like if all the games are shorter, are people going to flip out because like, oh man, the New Game Plus didn't do this? And like, are people going to flip out because the content in each individual game, first party speaking, I guess, is maybe a little bit less? Will people like lose their shit? That'll be interesting if they decide to go that route. But as far as smaller, weirder, I don't think that, I think that Sony will publish games that will seem like smaller, weirder games. They are just not going to develop them in-house per se. I think they'll do second party deals to bring back some of the older franchise games and stuff like that. Like for example, let's assume let's play a little game here, and that game is Sony will eventually make a new Twisted Metal. Just as an example, which I firmly believe, that is not rooted in any actual fucking science or someone telling me shit. I firmly believe that the popularity of the television show and the long-term popularity of that franchise and the fact that they've tried to do it a couple of times and have not been able to get it together, I think that will stick with them in a way that they will eventually go, fucking, all right, god damn it. yes, we're going to do this, but they will not do it in-house. They will find a smaller studio, external studio, and they will say, you are going to be like, we have some development resources like XDev or whatever in-house that you can work with, but we are going to pay this studio is going to make Twisted Metal for us. And other games of that nature, you know, the Ape Escapes of the world and what have you. I think that we will see some of those games come back to life through that sort of setup. You know, I think once you kind of go down that road, I think there are a lot of studios out there, a lot of small teams out there that would be able to really kill it on bringing back some of those franchises if they didn't have to make some big $70, like if someone sets out to and they go like, we're gonna make a Twisted Metal game and it has to be a $70 fucking monstrosity, like that's a failure. There's no world in which that game succeeds. But if you say, hey, we got a small team working on a new Twisted Metal, it's gonna be this $30-$40 thing, you know, $40 like a pretty good pocket to be in. You know, that's the marathon price point. That was what Helldivers was, right? I think that if you're doing something that is going to have some updates, it's not necessarily going to be full on live service crazy. But if you're going to go down that road, I think that's a really good pocket to be in. You can sell some DLC after the fact on that, and try and make that work. And so I think if you budget appropriately and you know, like, I think that could be exciting for people. I would also say that those games are not necessarily going to push the limits of any piece of technology that we currently own, right? So in this magic world where we're assuming a Twisted Metal game eventually gets made, I don't think that whatever team that they would go to make that would make something that would push a PlayStation 6 to its absolute limits. And so with that in mind, you would, of course, put it out on PlayStation 5 as well. You know? And so I think the lines around the upcoming generation will be weird. Again, like, Microsoft will have the added benefit of just it being a different weird device. And so their transition will feel much more like a transition, I think, than Sony's will. Unless Sony's got some weird trick up its sleeve beyond the handheld thing. Again, which we're assuming a lot on the handheld thing. That rumor has stuck. You know, the handheld thing has definitely like come up enough different times now, and I think it makes some logical sense when you think about the world and you think about Japan and you think about selling, you know, having a more cost-effective device or whatever. I do think that all of that lines up in a way that you see it and go like, yeah, I could see that going down. I could see that happening. But dude, I'm not going to sit here and say that I absolutely know 100%. Yes, they are absolutely putting this out. The console's happening, the handheld's happening. Like, I can't. I'm not there. I'm not there. I have not had enough conversations around that stuff to really know. And so, you know, like we'll see. Maybe all of that stuff ends up being a farce, or maybe it's something they explored long enough for rumors to get started and then said, actually, we're not going to do this. Plans change, pal. Like, the industry is a fucking crazy place, right? And especially as systems and everything gets more expensive, there's two ways you can go with it, right? On one hand, you can go, well, we need to make a handheld because it'll be cheaper than our default console, and that'll be a way for us to sell more of them, which is kind of the Xbox Series S strategy. Or you say, hey, we're only going to be able to make X number of units because of the costs on these things, so let's go all in on the expensive one, and maybe we'll revisit the handheld thing later, you know, or whatever, right? That's strategically, you could try to make a case for either one of those things. But who the fuck knows? That's the frustrating part about right now. Or the tantalizing part. I don't know. It's not even frustrating per se. It is the part of where we are right now is that I think there's a lot of logical rumors out there that you look at and say, I think this makes a lot of sense. I think this is the direction they'll probably go in. But there are some things that they're working on right now that they probably don't even know if it's going to happen or not. You know? So, what hope do the rest of us have when it comes to the rumor mill and all of that sort of stuff? Let's take one more break, and we'll come back, and perhaps we will get into emails after this. You want to get meat delivered right to your front door? You want to open up your door and be like, look at all this meat. What's up with all this meat? It's like Sam the Butcher bringing Alice the meat, only I am Alice and Sam the Butcher is Good Chop. Good Chop delivers high-quality American meat and seafood straight to your door, vacuum sealed and frozen at peak freshness. This helps you keep your freezer stocked. You cook it when you want to cook it, and you don't have to gamble on grocery store quality again. You never, you go into the grocery store, who knows what they got left? Who knows how long it's been there? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It ain't like it was, You go into a meat market, he's like, this is fresh, this. There's like, I don't know, man, we got meat. You walk in there, there's a guy like, I don't know, man. This is the meat we got. No, don't settle. Good Chop delivers good meat. You can customize your box from over 100 menu items, including USDA choice and prime steaks, 100% grass-fed beef, wild-caught seafood, organic chicken, responsibly raised pork, and so much more. Good Chop's meat comes from local family farms and independent ranchers right here in the United States of America. And they only source the good stuff, which is why Good Chop feels confident about their 100% money-back guarantee. Either you love Good Chop or you get your money back. They sent over a box, man. It's some real good meat. Stuff the freezer full of it. And you got some chicken ready. You got some ground beef ready. You got a steak or two. You got a nice filet ready to go. Some salmon. Ready to hook it up when you are. If you're ready to hook up some meat, Good Chop is ready for you. Go to goodchop.com/podcast and use the code 50Jeff to get $50 off plus free shipping on your first order. That's $50 off plus free shipping at goodchop.com/podcast and use the code 50Jeff. Emails. podcast@guard.bike is the email address for you to send in your emails to me, and I will look at them right now. Tyson wrote in and said, what are some of your favorite trackball arcade games? I really like Cabal, he says. Well, Tyson, Crystal Castles. And Reactor. I like Reactor, though I think I prefer the Atari 2600 version of Reactor, which is not a trackball game. Missile Command is extremely good. But yeah, Crystal Castles is probably my go-to. That's the one I always think of when I think about a trackball. Is good old Bentley Bear getting his gems, rolling behind the structure and hitting the jump button to find the magic warp zone to warp ahead to further levels. But yeah, Reactor is real cool. Centipede is one of the greatest games of all time. Centipede is one of those golden era classics that I think if you were building a very short list of arcade games that were everywhere, arcade games that absolutely transformed the business, I think Centipede and Centipede would certainly be on that list. I might actually prefer Millipede, to be honest, but certainly Centipede. Gosh, those are probably the big ones. I don't know. There's other stuff for sure that I don't know. There's a million different billiards games. It seems like that used trackballs back then. That none of which were actually very good. But yeah, that's Crystal Castles is probably my big one. I liked Kickman. Kickman used a trackball, but it was you only moved left and right. So it was kind of a weird sort of thing. There was the track cylinder in Major Havoc machines, I think, is actually really awesome too, but I mean that's technically not a trackball, so you know. Jim writes in, would the PlayStation have been a success if the CDI and 3DO were not failures? As in, if those two systems had big market share, would there have been room for a third, like the PlayStation? I think that if the CDI and 3DO were like really good game machines and really well supported by developers, that would have probably slowed Sony's ascent to the top with the PlayStation. But the capabilities of the PlayStation were dramatically beyond the certainly the CDI, which is, you know, basically like the CDI is not a polygon pushing machine. The 3DO is in some ways, but is still not great at it. The 3DO still better for a lot of 2D. Though I was playing Balls the Director's Cut on 3DO last night, or at least on the work in progress Mr. Core for the 3DO that just came out. And you know, that runs at a good smooth frame rate for what it is. Compared to the Genesis version, I guess. Balls the Director's Cut runs a lot better. But I think, you know, the PlayStation prioritized 3D hardware in a way that those machines certainly did not. In a way that the Saturn certainly, you know, did not fully take advantage of. And so I think that the CDI and 3DO are fundamentally different machines. And so, you know, there is still a generational shift, certainly between the CDI and the PlayStation. The 3DO and the PlayStation is a little more narrow, but again, when you look at how Sega did with the Saturn in the same market, and that's a machine that is a more capable polygonal machine than the 3DO was, and they were not able to get it done. I think there would have been plenty of room for PlayStation, especially at the price point that they hit compared to, I mean, remember when the CDI and the 3DO launched, they were a fucking $1 trillion. Like those things were zillions of dollars. Those things were like sell your kidney levels of like just stupid costs associated with those machines compared to the other video game consoles of the day. And so if PlayStation still comes along in, you know, 94 or whatever, and you still have them getting on a stage and saying, yeah, $299, like everyone else is still fucked, you know? So I don't think that any of that would have stopped PlayStation. I think that, you know, if those games were popular, if those machines were popular and got better third-party support, then that would have, again, that would have been a thorn in their side at best. But I think developers would have very quickly gotten on board with the PlayStation, especially because they could take their 3DO games and put them out on PlayStation, which some of them did. You know, Crystal Dynamics certainly moved a lot of their games over in the years that followed the 3DO. And so you would have just seen more of that, and you would have seen direct ports of 3DO games to the PlayStation, and you would have seen how much better they run on PlayStation, and just been like, dude, fuck this thing. Sorry, Trip, I'm done. And that would have been that. So no, I don't think it would have been a massive. I don't think things would have turned out dramatically differently on that front. All right. Max from Brisbane writes in and says, quick one about, this is Marathon versus Titanfall. Says, I love this game, the gameplay, the style, the setting, all of it, which made me think of another game that launched similarly, Titanfall. Big developer, Unreal sci-fi setting, great gameplay, and it launched multiplayer only. I think Bungie releasing an expansion or sequel to Marathon with a single-player campaign would be sick. What do you think? And then Max says he's from Brisbane. It says Sydney's running out of fuel and turning into an actual wasteland, and it's great to see. Great. So sure. Yeah, if Bungie wanted to make a single-player video game in the Marathon universe, that'd be something I would be interested in. You say an expansion or a sequel or something that had a single-player campaign, I guess. Like, I don't. It's sort of a it's sort of a fake. Like you can't really. One of the things I've seen multiple times in the wake of Marathon's release has been a handful of people that are saying, if this game was a single player game, I would buy it. Like, okay. What? Like, at some point, you're like, if this game was completely different than the game that it is, if this game was if you took this game and flushed all of it down the toilet and then made a different game instead, then I would buy it. Like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, sure. Like, that's not a, like, that's a really insane criticism, because you're asking for a fundamentally different thing. And so, yeah, if they added a single player, whether it was an expansion or if they did decide to make a Marathon game that was a single player thing, like, sure, man. Yeah, I think that, like, the universe certainly supports it. I think that there's a room to make that sort of thing if you really wanted to. I think if I were to make a story-driven campaign in the Marathon universe at this point, I would probably try to fit it into a multiplayer framework and make it a sort of co-op focused kind of thing. At a minimum, and say, hey, here's, hey, we like, you can take your team of 3 players into this thing and go read terminals together. But like, I don't. Sure. Who's making those at this scale and at this budget? And so I think the other thing that I say when people say that is like, yeah, you would, and a lot of people wouldn't. And so I don't like the idea of like, man, if only they made a single player version of this thing, that would be yeah, I guess. Like, how many people are out there like demanding single player shooter campaigns? Like, I think that some of them are cool, and there have been obviously like amazing ones in the past, but like the stuff I'm seeing right now in terms of shooter campaigns that are exciting are all like very small developers on PC making the world's most insane looking shit. And you look at it and go like, yeah, hell yeah, fuck yeah. And the idea of a big budget shooter campaign that is detached from a multiplayer thing completely, because what you're saying is, I don't want this multiplayer thing, I want a single player thing. Like, that's not a game that people buy anymore in the types of quantities that justify that budget and all of that other stuff, So it's just like, yeah, eventually there will probably be another Halo campaign, right? Like, they'll put out this Unreal Engine Halo remake, and then they will probably make a new Halo game, and that game will probably have a campaign. I'm not saying that shooter campaigns are dead and can never happen. I'm not saying that, that shooter campaigns are completely undesirable. But I think the complaint of, man, this game, I like it, but what if instead it was a totally different video game? Like, it's just nonsense. It's a really nonsense argument. And you're fine to say it, but I like when you back into the reality behind that sentiment, you are literally asking for a different video game. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the actual market for people who want those campaigns is not what you think it is, and I think that especially outside of Call of Duty, which I think still gets away with it because it has to. Though this year's Call of Duty, I think they were like, fuck it. Instead of making this big, expensive, bespoke campaign, we're going to make a multiplayer-focused thing and just make it insane. And you saw what that got them. Culinary Disaster says, I'll take more Stalker 2 any day. Yeah. And that's, I think, like, I feel like something like Stalker 2 is also like a fairly different thing than what we're talking about. When we talk about the traditional kind of like console, Bungie, whatever shooter campaign, you know, that's not Stalker 2 either. So, you know, I think that there's just I don't know, that like people don't really want that as much as you think they do. And I, you know, sure, I would be interested in a long story set in that universe, because I think there's a lot of interesting stories to be told. I think Bungie has at least one more story about an AI gone crazy in them. You know? Like, this AI, it turned 7 and it went fucking bananas. What are we going to do? It's so mean now. The AI is so rampant now. What do we do? I think they've got at least one more story in them. When it comes to that. But yeah, I also think like it's sort of you know, and I get it. Whatever, man. Like it's you're wistful for the old days. That's the way that comes across to me, is like it is adjacent to a lot of the other people who say like, man, games were better before. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Some games, some genres, tastes changed. You know, there are styles of games that have certainly gone out of style that maybe will come back in someday. Maybe they won't. But, you know, I try to be realistic about it, and that's why I say it's silly to say things like that in a lot of ways, because the industry is just not set up to support that sort of thing right now. And to that degree, to that budget, to that whatever, right? I mean, again, there are plenty of small teams making really crazy and fascinating shooters with campaigns in them right now. And some of them look absolutely awesome, but you know, multiplayer is what people want. Multiplayer is what people are talking about. Multiplayer gets the people going, man. Multiplayer sells skins, baby. So it's just just a fundamentally different transaction with players. It's a fundamentally different budget for, you know, what you're selling and how you're selling it, all that shit. Jacques writes in with a fascinating question that we've talked about on Fridays quite a bit. Do you have any thoughts on why developers or designers who made some of the best games on the Atari 2600 ended up churning out so many abysmal to mediocre games for subsequent consoles, and why that wasn't the case for their forays into computer game development? I'm thinking particularly of the former Activision folks who went on to form Imagineering/Absolute because they seem to be the worst offenders. I don't know that I ever had a good time with any post-2600 console game by that crew, not that I played them all. I do remember playing Bart vs. the Space Mutants as a kid and immediately clocking the stink of 2600 on it, and not just via the recycled Keystone Capers jump sound. Aside from just not being fun, the game's previous gen elements felt extra low rent, and I say that as someone who grew up loving the 2600. Yeah, right. I mean, yes, the Imagineering conversation is such a fucking fascinating one, because as I've gone through and ranked all of these NES games we have played, I believe there might still be one left, but I want to say we've played every single one of the games that Imagineering has made for that platform. And that is the through line on a lot of them, is you see a lot of stuff that would have flown, like they look like 2600 games that have been beefed up. They look like enhanced edition ports of 2600 games in some ways. And that's, you know, that's maybe not entirely fair, because the scope of some of these games is a lot larger than what you could get away with on the 2600. But from a gameplay perspective, these games don't feel like they evolved enough. And in the ways that they did evolve, they're terrible. Like those Simpsons games are miserable fucking video games. Absolute trash. Some of that comes from the way those games control. They put the run mechanic is on the same button as jump, and that's crazy. And so there's a handful of Imagineering games like that where you just look at them and go like, these seem like they came from insane people that never played a modern video game before. And you look at it and go like, oh yeah, like maybe they didn't keep current. Maybe they didn't really keep track of where games were going, you know, that maybe their skills kind of, you know, plateaued at a certain point and they just kept doing the same thing they were doing. And they got more power from the consoles that they were making games on, but it didn't necessarily mean that they were evolving the way they kept thinking about how games could be made. And I think that comes down to like sometimes it felt like they weren't taking advantage of a controller that had 2 buttons on it instead of just one. Like it's just like weird ideas around how the games could and should control and everything else. So there's sort of a that is sort of the through line there. I do think like, you know, David Crane made A Boy and His Blob, and I think the game's cool. It's a very different game, except when I was playing it and we were ranking it, it was the first time, you know, because I'd played A Boy and His Blob back when it originally came out, and I was like, oh, this game's neat, and they did this, but you know, over the years, I kind of like started maybe not feeling super positive about that game. But when I went back and played it more recently when we were ranking it, I came to the realization that that is a Pitfall game. Like the blob and the jelly beans and all of that stuff obviously like take things in a different direction. But in terms of like the way that world is built and structured, I like realized after staring at it for an hour or so, they're like, oh shit, like this is Pitfall 2. Like the way these levels are built, it is exactly fucking Pitfall 2. In terms of, you know, the way the screens fit together and some of the other things you can do. And it was like this crazy moment for me of just like, oh my God, like David Crane just made another sequel to Pitfall. After making Pitfall 2, he went and made A Boy and His Blob, and it's basically Pitfall 3. And that was really fucking mind-blowing to like figure out, or to see, you know, even not necessarily figure out, but like to see the through line in some of those design sensibilities and concepts, and just go like, oh shit, like there's a lot of stuff in this game that you look at and go, this is where the Pitfall 2 concept went afterwards, and that's a really insane thing to figure out. But I think that, you know, like he did better there with A Boy and His Blob than Dan and Gary Kitchen did with a lot of the Imagineering stuff, and that Imagineering stuff is rough, real rough. But yeah, I don't know. I would kind of attribute a lot of that to this idea of like, you know, these guys were legendary creators on a previous platform, and maybe they didn't think they needed to evolve. Maybe they were like, maybe they thought, I don't know. Did they have a chip on their shoulder? Did they think that they were hot shit, but the industry had moved on? Did they just not think they needed to? I don't really know. They were making those games pretty quickly. They were banging them out because that's what they always did, right? And they were used to working on small teams and knocking shit out fast. So maybe that's why. But regardless of the reasoning behind it, when you look at Bart versus the Space Mutants and you look at the other games that team made for the NES, it is a really weird it's a really weird like lineage, and those games are kind of terrible. And that's very interesting in its own weird way, right? Let's see. George in London writes in and says, the Switch 2's 12 gigs of RAM has 3 gigs reserved for system features, primarily game chat. I get the strong impression that most Switch 2 owners forget game chat is even there, let alone use that feature with any kind of regularity. It feels a bit odd that Nintendo might increase the Switch 2 price because RAM costs when a decent chunk of that memory isn't ever in use for so many customers. But what other options do Nintendo have, if any? Yeah. Game chat, right. I don't know. It's a weird... I forgot that was there. I found my camera for the Switch 2 the other day, like shoved behind my TV, and I was like, oh, right. Something that happens with some of these systems, I believe the Xbox 360 went through a revision like this. I think even the Switch 1 did as well, where as they get better at optimizing their own firmware and their own internal system level features and whatever, that sometimes that footprint is reduced, years into the system cycle. They go like, hey, we freed up some more RAM for developers to use. Now that's not necessarily going to help old games, but it does result in a weird situation where like, oh, now developers can push the RAM a little bit further than maybe they were able to before. And so maybe we see something like that down the line. And if there's weird restrictions or like, oh, you can't use this feature because we use that. You can't use game chat in this game because we use that for more RAM for the game. Like maybe. But 3 gigs reserved for system features is not something that is a dramatic, like that's every platform does it, like every system has some amount of RAM reserved for system usage these days. It's not something new. It's not something that developers are not familiar with or whatever. So I wouldn't necessarily look at it as like some crazy situation like, oh, Nintendo and game chat and what a waste. Like if it wasn't game chat, it would have been something else. Like, the footprint, that RAM footprint is not necessarily all because of game chat, It's everything. It's the front end UI. It's taking screenshots. It's, like all of that shit. So I wouldn't, I don't know. And also, like that doesn't, they can't put 9 gigs of RAM in a unit. So it doesn't necessarily result in a cost reduction on that front. They would not, to my point, they would not release a Switch 2 down the line that uses less RAM. They would not put a system out and say, oh, this one has less RAM than the other ones, but it's fine. Maybe you can't do this or can't do that, but like they won't do. It's very unlikely that they won't do that. Or it's very unlikely that they would do something like that. So, and they don't, and this is what the system was made on. So developers know that restriction going in. They know that they got this much RAM to work with and they use it. That's just how all games, all environments, all specs have some sort of restrictions around the edges of it. So it's not really it's not really useful to kind of break this down this way. Because it just kind of is what it is. And again, maybe they free up some of that RAM for developers somewhere down the line, as they continue to iterate on the firmware and on the system features and software side of it or whatever. So yeah. Let's see here. Mike in Taunton, UK writes in to ask about Driver 3. Finally, the topics that matter. Do you think the long print lead times helped lead to the Driver 3 review debacle? In memory, I can only remember Rise of the Robots having the same issues with scores on unfinished builds or just some side-eye nonsense. What are your memories of the Driver better than GTA 3 review mess? I have no memory of that. Were there people out there saying Driver 3 was good? Because I don't remember that. Like what you're saying sounds like that there were other reviews out there trying to say that Driver was better than GTA, which that's fucking stupid. But also, there's always some fucking stupid shit. There's always someone willing to say, "Man, this game's incredible." Like, but Driver 3 being better than GTA, that sounds like something that would exist in a preview. Let me see if I can. I don't know. I don't remember this. I remember Driver 3 sucking. I remember Driver 3 being a bad video game. That's my primary memory of Driver 3. I remember getting review builds in and sitting down and playing it and being like, oh God, like this is awful. But I'm trying to search around right now to see if I can find anything that's specific that about, you know, someone saying that Driver 3 is better than GTA, and I'm not immediately seeing anything. But what did the Metacritic reviews for Driver 3 have to say back in the day? The Xbox version has a Metascore of 56. PlayStation 2 has a 57. View all reviews. Times Online gave it a 100. Yeah, that bastion for video game coverage. The Times. Playboy gave it an 88. Again, you know, no one's better at reviewing video games than Playboy. One Up gave it an 85. Again, just these great video game focused publications that always nailed it and were never wrong. Yeah, I don't know. And then like EGM gave it like a 75. I assume that's like some kind of cluster of reviews or whatever. But as far as like you know, you're specifically asking about like lead times for print magazines, and I don't think that's necessarily you know, like that would lead to a situation where someone had to review a non-final version of the game, which is how print magazines had to do it because they had these long lead times. And so they would have to review a submission build or even a pre-submission build with a list of caveats and stuff. And generally, because we were shorter lead time, because we were online, it was a lot easier for us to, you know, hold out for final versions of games. Which sometimes I was a stickler for because sometimes you just don't trust a company and you know that they're giving you a bad build. But even looking at these reviews from people that, you know, had positive things to say about fucking Driver 3, which is very funny. Apparently Games Radar, I guess PSM 2 gave the PS2 version of Driver 3 a 90. The pull quote here is, "A technical marvel that sets a new benchmark. The plot may twist until you lose grip of it altogether, but the balls out street driving action saves the day." Yeah, you're fucking wrong. I mean, it's fine. You're just fucking wrong. Like, that's not true. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying fucking stop. I wonder who wrote that. The link doesn't go anywhere because Games Radar doesn't. Oh, this was a UK. So PSM2 is like a UK based publication on top of that. So, you know. Yeah, Driver 3 was a terrible video game. Like, plot-wise, control-wise, like, I don't think it looked especially great. Like, it just, you know, like, that's just a fucking bad game top to bottom. So, yeah, that is most of what I remember. The thing I remember about Driver 3 is over here on my shelf. Hang on. Let me go grab it. So here's a sealed copy of Driver 3 that I just happen to have. a sealed PS2 copy that the guy who was doing PR for Atari at the time sent this to us. I think it was about a month or more after the game had been released. So it was like a while after Driver 3 had come out, the reviews had settled and whatever else. And he sent us this copy of the game with a Post-it note attached to it. And the Post-it note reads, just in case you want to relive the glory. Which is a very funny thing to do. To send us a copy of the game a month after it came out with a Post-it on it that says, just in case you want to relive the glory, is a very fucking funny thing to do. So that's amazing. I'm trying to let's see what's going to be the right way to do this. I don't have a good camera set up that I can use to show this the Post-it note to you very quick. Let me see if I can add it here for the so I can at least take a picture of it, if nothing else. But at least I can get it that way. Okay, maybe is this gonna be it? No. Is that going to be it? No, because that device is in use because it's technically part of the other scene. Or okay, anyway, I will take a picture of this and post it somewhere so you can see this incredible Post-it note. But yeah, that's when I think about Driver 3. This is what I think about, and this is literally been sitting on the shelf over there since I found it, going through stuff in the garage. But yes, just in case you want to relive the glory, Driver 3. It's always great when people working at a company know. They know. When they know that their game is... I like to imagine, I never talked to anyone about it, but I assume it's a situation where, like, you know, all the reviews have run, you're sitting in your office, you've got a bunch of copies of Driver 3 still sitting there that, you know, you sent out your allotment and maybe there's a few more in the office, and you see one and you go, you know, it would be really funny. And you write the Post-it note and put it on there. And then it was not sent to me directly, but I ended up with it. It's very, very funny. Very, very funny. But yes, that is all I think about when I think about Driver 3. Is that it was a pretty bad fucking game. There was Matthew from Botchamania posted a picture on Blue Sky yesterday that, like, he was at some movie theater or something that had a wall devoted to Ubisoft, and there was like a timeline for Ubisoft on there, and Driver 3 was called out specifically, and there was a QR code. He posted a screenshot of it, and I went and I looked at the QR code. Because it said, watch the developers play Driver 3. I was like, what the fuck? Like, who's doing this? Like, why is anyone doing this? Why is anyone specifically calling out Driver 3? And I scanned the QR code in his screenshot, and it brought me to a YouTube video that was recorded last year with two developers from Ubisoft Reflections now. Sitting down and playing Driver 3. It was recorded last year. Like, last year they said, let's sit down and we'll record a Driver 3 thing. It's because we need it for this QR code for this thing. It was just like a really strange, like, why are we doing this? Why did you make these people sit down and play Driver 3? What the fuck is happening? It was like just a really strange, I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know. Driver 3 in the news lately. I don't know. So it's everywhere. It's all over the internet. Everyone's talking about it. Evan from Edinburgh, Scotland, writes in and asks, with the recent success of Arc Raiders introducing the extraction shooter genre to a wider audience, and Marathon so far looking like it will continue to build upon that success, coverage of these games often references to, or are often references to others in the space as points of comparison. One game which is consistently mentioned in these comparisons is Escape from Tarkov, more so than others like Hunt Showdown, the Division Dark Zone, etc. But I don't think I've ever seen any mainstream coverage of Escape from Tarkov like there has been with the others, despite it being perceived, by me at least, as somewhat of a godfather of the extraction shooter genre. I'm curious as to why you think that might be. It feels like it hangs over the genre like some Spectre, only talked about in hushed tones and played in the shadows by perverts. So the reason is because it wasn't on Steam. Like if you want, I mean, I think the reality of it is that if you wanted to play Escape from Tarkov, you had to jump through some hoops, and it was not always immediately clear what thing you needed to buy. It was in some standalone launcher. They didn't have much of a PR department that was like writing to journalists and saying, hey, you should cover this. I have at times gotten hit up from someone who works on Tarkov saying like, hey, you should, you know, hey, if you ever want to check it out, you can do this. And so I did eventually. That is how I tried out Escape from Tarkov, is because they did finally say, hey, we are representing this game. Do you want to do it? Do you want to take a look at it? And I said, sure, I should probably see this thing. And so I played some of it and went like, ugh. But yes, I think like the sad truth of it is that like, I think to play Escape from Tarkov, you had to kind of get outside of the landscape of the existing popular launchers and all of this other stuff. There was not enough of a demand for it for people to want to do that. And so even though that game sold however many millions of copies it sold, it just never really showed up on anyone's radar. It is finally now on Steam after all those years. And so there's that. But like Tarkov seemed like I don't know, not a scam per se, but like Escape from Tarkov just seemed like such a fucking, like it seemed adjacent to Star Citizen in like that, like it's existing off to the side. You don't know where to find it. You don't know exactly how to get it. It's in some kind of early access and you're not really sure if it's time to cover it or if you should wait. There's a lot of like real weird stuff they have done with Escape from Tarkov over the years that made it very easy to take a look at it and go like, ugh, gross. What the hell are those people doing? And so I think it just became, it just became this kind of like, not necessarily talked about in hushed tones, but it was just like you had to jump through a bunch of hoops to play it and it wasn't worth it. Period. You know? And so Hunt Showdown, it was interesting because, you know, at the time, because it broke through in a way that that Tarkov didn't, in terms of just like more people playing it who were maybe not sickos. You know, the Post Malones of the world. But like, you know, as people, you know, started to see that game and then realize like, oh, this is like a smaller version of what that thing is doing, or this is a honed, optimized version of what some of these other games are doing. I think that became sort of interesting. But also, I don't know that I would say that. I don't know, like Hunt Showdown is very much an extraction shooter, but also I feel like the way that they cut the genre up into their own things, that game always felt different to me than Tarkov, different than The Division, and different than a lot of the other kind of stuff that came along, and different to a degree from Arc Raiders and from Marathon. And so like Hunt, I don't know, in a lot of ways Hunt feels like it's kind of its own thing, but I suppose it's not. I suppose ultimately like they are doing, like they're facing the same concepts and issues and like, oh, what do we do when everyone's got good loot and no one wants more loot? How do we wipe? Do we do this? You know, there's like, I think that they have to think about a lot of the same problems that that Tarkov had to deal with. And it sounds like the way that Tarkov is dealing with things is not super well liked. because they're splitting matchmaking along, like, so they have seasonal characters in that game and they have permanent characters in that game. And so in theory, the permanent characters become more and more and more and more powerful as time goes on, whereas the seasonal characters wipe the way that everyone else seems to be doing it now. Though I guess Arc Raiders is sort of different in that you don't necessarily have to, right? It's just like you go on the expedition and reset. You choose to because the benefits outweigh the, you know, or whatever, right? But like Arc found its own way to kind of thread that needle, right? And I think that stuff is, it's interesting to watch the way that some of these different studios have looked at the problems that a game like Tarkov has faced, and found ways to either address those problems. Some ways are very similar to the ways that Tarkov addressed them, and some ways are fairly different, you know? And I think that's interesting because ultimately the extraction shooter genre has a lot of inherent issues. It has a lot of inherent problems that they have to kind of artificially, and I say this about Marathon as well, but I think that the interesting thing that Marathon is doing, or will probably do, is I think the lore and the universe of Marathon is really set up really well to support things like a wipe. I say, you know, but also I think Arc Raiders did a really good job of finding, like, the way that they frame it. I think that stuff is really interesting. It doesn't make me want to play Arc Raiders any more than I already do. Like, that's ultimately still the problem with it, is like, I don't like that third person shooter. I don't like their guns. I don't like the progression. Like, it's all this stuff that I think Marathon does that is not always better than Arc. It's just in some cases they made different decisions than the Arc Raiders team did. And I think those decisions fit more with what I'm looking to get out of a game like this. You know what I mean? And so it really is this kind of interesting thing of just like, how do we find ways to solve these issues? But like, again, that interesting thing is like, these are issues that are inherent to the genre. Like, this genre is flawed by definition. It's kind of a crazy thing to begin with, right? Maybe you could say that about every genre of video game ever made, is that they're all just a series of problems, and how do you solve those problems? But they are unique sets of problems because it's an economy of sorts. It is around the loot and who has it and who has too much of it, and how do you keep that from happening? How do you keep players from gaining infinite power in ways that upset the balance of the game? How do you, how do you actually solve these issues? It's an interesting, set of issues that developers have had to tackle. And like I said, I think that, Marathon has not had a season wipe or a wiper of any kind yet, but I think that, like, what they've done in terms of building their universe and building their lore and integrating their lore, like the things in Marathon that become the hooks that keep you there, I think are a lot cooler than Arc Raiders, than Hunt, than a lot of the other stuff that I have played over the years. And I don't even, as much as there are certainly similarities, and it's a progenitor of all of this, like, I don't even really include the Dark Zone Division stuff in this conversation. Because it's a part of a different game. And so like those issues get solved by virtue of, like, you take the guns out of this mode and then go do the other stuff with them. And that's the value. Where if you just have this, if you just have your meat grinder, then what? It's a very different thing. So the Division kind of doesn't have to deal with these issues as directly as as Arc Raiders would, for example. Anyway, that's Evan. I think that is the answer to your question, is that Tarkov has been in the shadows, and it is developed somewhere by a team that no one knows, and I think that they have just been off the beaten path in a way that, like, no one really wanted to No one really wanted to jump through the hoops to see it, or there just was not enough interest there from users to pressure you into going and finding, whatever the fuck is going on with Tarkov. So, in some cases, for a lot of reporters that are not looking to play like a fucking hardcore, and the way you hear about Tarkov is always like, oh, it's for sickos, it's a milsim for fucking lunatics, and it's this or that, it's so brutal, it's this. It's a lot easier as a reporter if you're not really covering the multiplayer beat. It's a lot easier to go to find someone who is playing that game and talk to them instead of necessarily playing it yourself, and just try to get a lay of the land. Is like, what the fuck is this thing? Do I need to care about it? And I think oftentimes a lot of people would come back and the answer would be no, not really. You don't really need to care about it. It's happening, but it's not happening to a degree that you need to know. So I'm in the middle of writing. I'm almost done with it, I think, but I've been writing a review of Marathon off and on for the past few days here, and this will make a lot more sense when you can read the full thing, and so this will sound slightly hyperbolic, but I look at Marathon, and when I look at the people that it has in a chokehold, the people who are all about Marathon, and how it is a much wider array and range of people than got into Ark, and that certainly got into any of these shooters that came before Ark. Marathon is the World of Warcraft of extraction shooters. That's where I'm at with it. And I explain that a lot more in the review, but that's but basically I think that's where that game is at. And it's fucking awesome. It's so fucking good, man. Anyways. Rory from Jacksonville, Manitoba writes in. It says, the video game industry is undergoing an insane, chaotic way that I'm pretty sure everything is going to be burnt down and rebuilt pretty soon. I don't see things continuing this way. It's so completely chaotic. My question is, what is it going to take for everyone to decide it's time to start doing things differently, and what would that even entail? So yeah, I mean, this is some of the talk that I think, kind of came out of DICE and GDC, I think, to a certain degree. I was not at GDC, but talking to folks who were there and seeing some of the conversations that were happening around that show. I think that I think that, like a lot of these companies are very slow to change, and I think that a lot of these companies are very wrapped up in the way that they've been doing things. But I also think that at a high level, this is something that I saw coming out of DICE from pretty high level folks, people that have been in the video game industry for decades and decades. Like, they're not dumb. They're not just like existing, going along like, well, I don't know. I made my bones in the arcades and I'm still making video games and it's going fine. I don't know. What's the problem? Like no one's got their head in the sand sitting there going like, all of this is going great and nothing's ever going to go wrong. I think everyone's pretty keenly aware that like there's a substantial problem right now. Just that the economics of big game development, or, the number of layoffs that are happening as a result of that, along with everything else. And I think that like people are starting to break it down into, and it's hard in the middle of all this chaos. It's a very difficult thing to try to parse, right? Let alone do anything about. But I do think that there are external factors that are obviously like limiting the growth of the video game industry, that are causing a lot of these problems. Things like what COVID did to game development for a good chunk of time there. Obviously the economy and RAM prices and AI and all of this horse shit. Like, there's a lot of stuff external to video games that are applying pressure. But there are a lot of things inside of the video game industry that are well within the grasp of these decision makers to fucking be able to grab onto it and be like, there's got to be a better way. And I think that, you know, we're seeing people start to want to navigate that more and more. I don't know what it looks like though. And I think the other situation is like, will the quote unquote mainstream video game audience be willing to accept a world in which they like, what happens if things change in such a way that yes, we get big games more often, but also the big games are not as big as they used to be? What happens if these games come out and they are, again, I think I was saying it earlier in the show, like what happens if a big first party game comes out and it's like an 8-hour thing? Like as this open world game, it's got some 8 hours of stuff, and you know, and it's $70, and the prices don't go down because, you know, the economics have not necessarily changed. Like I think that, like, and I see people in chat saying that sounds pretty good, and I think I agree with that like, you know, some maybe smaller games, some more finishable games, all of that sort of stuff, I think like that's okay. But I think that like the conditioning on some of the modern audience has gotten out of whack, and I think that their expectations as to what they get for their money and you know, like the thing you see it with single player games, even though it's ridiculous, but you know, it is something that is meant for multiplayer games. It's been like a little bit of the conversation around Marathon, which seems kind of stupid. But it is that thing where if a game doesn't immediately have a patch or update or new content or whatever, you get the run of people that just go, up, dead game. Like, what do they hope to earn? What kind of points are they hoping to earn by commenting things like that on things? It's like people that have become these like armchair analysts that have no idea how the business end of video games works. That are just like, yep, fuck this. This is done. This is history. This game's shot. They're fucked. It's shutting down tomorrow. Like I don't understand like the mentality there. And I think that games need to have downtime, and they need to have like, okay, now here's our new update and it's coming out, and maybe you pick it back up again, and maybe you play more of it, or maybe you've moved on to another game, and hey, you know, shit happens. It's a really weird, it's just a really weird mentality to see. And I think some of it's generational, you know, but I think some of those younger players, I think, have been conditioned to think that a game is going to get constant updates because they've been raised on nightmare free-to-play mobile games that have a bunch of like fake, like, oh, we put a bunch of new skins into the game today. Like that's not a real update. No one cares. But they think that there's got to be patch notes every day or a game's dead. And it's just like, I don't know. That's not realistic in any way, shape, or form, you know? And so, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of things have to change, but I think that getting there is a pretty difficult thing, because I think there's a lot more work to be done to reshape, not only how games are made, but the expectations of players and whatever else, right? Like more games that slot into that, like Romeo is a Dead Man. Like, was it like a $50, like that type of like, hey, here's a good chunky single player thing. And it's not the highest budget, most beautiful thing you've ever seen, but here's this cool thing. And, you know, like it's got a lot of cool ideas, and it doesn't stick the landing on all of them, but hey, man, it's still awesome. I think the people that are looking at like Steam charts or whatever to try to figure out the active players in a game or whatever, or like, it's I'm not going to say it's pointless, because, you know, it's one of those situations where, because we don't have good numbers, everyone has to look at bad numbers, and all we have are kind of incomplete numbers anyway. Also, none of us know what success looks like for some of these games, right? Like, I don't know. Like, you look at the stories that came out before Battlefield 6 shipped, where they were like, we need to have 100 million players. You know, like, well, I hope you're ready to lay some folks off, because there's no world in which you get 100 million players. hopefully that's not true. Hopefully it's not a true sentiment inside of EA, because anyone going around saying that should probably be fired, because that's not a realistic, like, if you really need that number for this game to succeed, you should kill it now. But whatever, that Battlefield 6 came out, it did better than a lot of people thought it was going to do. People seemed very excited about it. And then, some of the updates didn't hit, and the player number seems to be dwindling. I don't know, like, dwindling is maybe a bit extreme, but like, it's not what it was at its height. Is that the end of the world? I don't know. They had some layoffs. I know that much. So what does that mean? Maybe they were going to have layoffs no matter what, because they were always going to transition from a studio that worked on a campaign to all this other stuff to, hey, now we're just servicing this game with new multiplayer content, and so we don't need this many people on it, and so things need to kind of move in a different direction. That would just be sensible. The insensible part about that, the senseless part about all of that, is that you wouldn't have a new project for that single player team to roll onto already, because you could have seen this coming from a mile away. We talked about this when those layoffs happened, but you know what I mean. At the end of the day, I think you got to take the numbers with several grains of salt, because we know that they're incomplete, but also we don't really know what success looks like for any individual game. And so I think unless we hear specifically, and sometimes that does happen, but I think it's the thing where, there's also been this weird undercurrent of people who seem to want Marathon to fail, and I don't understand, like, what I like that. That mentality doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why are you, like, people very much, it's like, I don't know, just people want it to be the next Concord or High Guard or whatever. Like, I don't know what the fucking problem is. Like it's just like a strange strange situation where people are like looking at Steam player counts and like jumping up and down and going, yay, fuck this game. And it's like, all right, I don't know what, like, even if you don't, I'm not saying that everyone must love Marathon. Obviously it's a very specific type of game for a very specific type of player, but I do feel like I don't know, like I've never understood that mentality across the board. You see that, like you see that more and more lately, but it's just like, I don't know, people just, I don't know, like people think that they understand how this business works, and they've never been anywhere near it, and they've never been close to it. And I think that there's a lot of really weird shit swirling out there, and you never know what someone's like ulterior motives are. Like, it's just like strangers on the internet saying insane shit, and you just look at it and go like, I don't know where this is coming from. Like, what are these people's problem? Are these real people? Like I was saying earlier about the weird kind of positivity I saw around Crimson Desert. It was a situation where like even that seemed kind of strange. Like, you're just like, I don't know, are these real people? Are these? It's just a strange sort of thing. But like I kind of said about High Guard at the time, and certainly Conquered, is like you see those games and you see what they are, and you see how they came together, and you see, like, to me, those are qualitative problems. Like, especially like High Guard, I think it's very easy to play that game and go like, oh, this doesn't seem like, I know I don't want to play this again, but I also think that there are probably a lot of people who are in the same boat as me, and as such, I don't think this game has what it takes to survive in this environment. And I don't, like, that's not, I feel bad about it. Like, I feel like, that's not like, yeah, it's just like, I feel fucking terrible about that shit. The Conquered situation was the same deal. It's just like, yeah, I don't know, this game just doesn't seem very good. Like, that's the problem with it. Like, the ultimate problem with both of those games is that they were not very good games. And that's something you can kind of see in the numbers, because, High Guard obviously had its big day one with the Steam numbers, and you see that thing just crumble and fall apart. That's a trend. You can at least look at that and go like, yeah, I don't know, maybe the numbers on console look amazing, but like this if even a fraction of that is mirrored over on PlayStation and Xbox, that's probably real bad for them. And with how they were funded, that just creates a recipe for that game going away very quickly. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's just a weird it's a weird business. It's gotten weirder in some ways because I think, again, the way that social media and the way that people talk about games online now, like it's very weird. As it's spread out. Like I've talked about the idea that a lot of games kind of come and go. Like Death Stranding 2 was a big one for me at the time, where it was just like, yeah, man, felt like people were talking about that game for about a day and a half. For me, it was more like a week and a half because I knew a bunch of people were playing it before it was out. But like by and large, it felt like Death Stranding 2 was just like, boom, here and gone. People talked about it for about 90 seconds, and then that was that. Next game, what's going on? And so everything moves so fast now. And games just get trampled by whatever else is happening. And that's probably not a good thing for video games also, but I don't know how you solve that. I don't know. Let's see here. If there's anything else in the old inbox here. All right, last email from Chris in South Dakota, where they're experts in such things. Hey Jeff, apparently Alex fucks his cousin in the story mode of Street Fighter 6. That's the email. Huh. Now that's video games. Finally. Oh, sorry. Yes, gaped by gold dust, which is just fun to say out loud. Says he makes love to his cousin. Okay, well that's okay. Way better. Raised with her as his sister too. The art shows him holding her as a baby and then marrying her. Great. Well, I don't know. He's a fucking professional wrestler. What do you fucking expect, man? These guys are scumbags. I messed with Alex a little bit in Street Fighter 6. I loaded it up and just in like training mode and wanted to kind of see some of the stuff happen, do some of the moves and kind of see how it feels. And I was like, yeah, this seems all right. It's the one-winged angel is fun because they can't call it that because it's already a video game thing. And so it's in there as like a kind of cool, like the way you trigger it is kind of off of another hit, and then you have to hit both punches to kind of combo into it, and it's kind of a cool. It's hidden a little bit more than a lot of the other super moves, which is kind of neat. Well, now I guess I gotta play and finish that story mode, huh? Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of this program, because there's nothing more to say after that. Thanks everybody for listening. I'll be back next week with another episode of the show, of course. And if you want to see some live streaming video games, Wednesdays and Fridays are your day. We'll be here on Wednesday. We'll talk some more, and we'll play something. I don't know. And then on Friday we'll rank some more 8-bit Nintendo games. Come on through. We'll check it all out. Have a good rest of your week otherwise, and I'll see you soon. Bye.